So we're going to start the chapter on mind now that we've had the opening general chapter, and as we go through the three principles. And when I think of universal mind, I think of that which was there before creation. Whenever people think that that occurred, that there was a time when there was no form. And even the scientists, my wife Linda, who so much better read than I, talked to me about there was a group of 40-some scientists in the last few years that met at least twice over in France or somewhere. They're physicists, and they finally came to agreement that there was no form, that there was no matter. There was a time where there was only this formless energy, and it was, but they finally kind of fessed up. Yeah, this stuff about all the matter was compressed to the 1/1000th of a pinhead was nonsense, that there was no matter. So I think of universal mind as that which was present prior to the creation of form. And it's important to me because as a child, I was brought up that God was everywhere. And that really seemed a little weird to me. That meant he was in my mouse, it's in my paper, it was in my pen, it was in my glass. And now that makes perfect sense to me. That whatever I label that energy that was there before there was form, and a lot of people give God as that label, but if we call it Curly Mower Larry, as Judy suggested over in Australia years ago, it doesn't matter. Dave, I had people that didn't like the word God, so I said, what do you want to call it? I said, we'll call it Dave. I said, that's fine. Dave is everywhere then. Everything is made of Dave, because as Einstein and even the physicists have seen, that the entire universe, Einstein said, is the same energy. It's the same energy, both in form and formless, and it's going in and out of that. And so universal mind, I think of that intelligent energy that was there before there was any form and is still there, manifesting in everything that has form, just as Judy talked about the trees and the bacteria and you and I. So that's what I think of as mind, that it's that powerful spiritual force that's always trying to bring us home to our true nature, and to realize that that's what we're made of, is that formless energy that was there before form. So Judy, do you want to comment at all, or should we go to the?
Well, the only thing I would add to that is that when I think of mind, I think of it as infinity. Mm-hmm. You know, it was, is, and always will be. You know, it's like there could be nothing without it, and it can't. It is. It is. When Sid talks about the isness and the allness, that's really what he means.
Right, and it came from the great nothingness. The great nothingness created the isness, and together they're the allness. Yeah, and you try to wrap your intellect around that, and you go.
Because we're after the fact of it.
Yeah.
It's like trying to remember the womb. You know, you just can't.
Right. Yeah. But so what was it you said about that? That it's there was something that came. Infinity. You know, I was talking with Dick Bezoyan, and I'm sure Dick would feel okay with this. Dick was the head of, of education at British Air Electronics, and invited Sid. There was 8 to 10 PhD physicists from MIT, and I was just talking to Dick about this the other day, and in fact, I have it recorded. I'm going to get permission from him, but so Sid came, and Sid started teaching the physicists, the PhD physicists from MIT, physics. And he started talking about how brilliant that Einstein was, but that Einstein didn't understand infinity. And so his theory, his formula was wrong. It was incorrect. It wasn't E equal MC squared, it's E equal MC infinity. Mm-hmm. And Dick said he got a little bit insecure, and he stood up and Sid, you want to talk a little bit about the principles? And 4 of the PhD physicists from MIT stood up and said, Dick, sit down. He's on to something. And they listened for 3 days and invited him back for 3 more. So, yeah, anyway, universal mind. So I'll give it a start here. Every mind has direct access to its experience here on earth. And the human mind always has access to its own spiritual roots from which it came. The universal mind, or the impersonal mind, is constant and unchangeable. The personal mind is in a perpetual, I love that word, perpetual state of change. All humans have the inner ability to synchronize their personal mind with their impersonal mind to bring harmony into their lives. Wow. What a hopeful statement. Mm-hmm. I have some, and I'm sure you do too, I have people who think because of their past experiences or things they've done that that's impossible. Mm-hmm. And I'll often kiddingly say, oh, wait, I see your name down here. There's an asterisk down at the bottom of the page. I didn't realize. And it has your name as the exception. That you're the only one that doesn't have the ability. Oh, wow. I'd never noticed that before. Well, it's just not true. All humans have the inner ability to synchronize their personal mind with their impersonal mind to bring harmony into their lives. What a hopeful statement.
You know, I think that's the whole thing, is that moment in time when you realize that the personal mind is always going to be in a state of uproar and a state of constant change. And it doesn't matter, it's just behaving according to the law of the universe. And in harmonizing the personal and the impersonal doesn't mean that your personal mind stops being your personal mind.
Right.
It just means that it makes sense to you that it's changing and there's a constant behind it, you know, that it's going to change, and change is constant.
Right.
So,
is anybody
I think it's beautiful. I think that's kind of like, if I would have to choose one page, that would be the page.
Wow.
Love that page
you know,
too.
kind of like it changes. For me, it's like listening to a radio station, you know. It's like you have all this thinking, and it comes, and you know, and you just need to, you don't even move the dial, but the dial changes all the time, changes the stations. And every once in a while, you just speakers on the right station, you know.
Go ahead, Judy.
Okay. Some believe the brain and the mind are the same, but there has to be a power behind the brain to make it function. The brain and the mind are 2 entirely different things. The brain is biological, the mind is spiritual. The brain acts like a computer. Whatever you put into it is all you get out. This is logic. I'm just going to read this last paragraph. An important thing to realize is that universal mind and personal mind are not 2 minds thinking differently, but 2 ways of using the same mind. Which is another way of saying they are synchronized, and when we realize it, we're at peace. But I think, don't you think, Bill, as a doctor, I think that the brain is biological and the mind is spiritual has been a difficult point, I think, for some people in the medical field to accept, because you can't measure and study the spiritual. And so you have to take it on faith that power is there. And yet it's very difficult not to accept the idea that there's something behind. The brain wouldn't move, the brain wouldn't think, the brain wouldn't function if that spiritual energy wasn't there.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. There's it doesn't matter his name. I think it's from one of the famous universities out east, that a neuroscientist that says the mind is just the summation of the brain's functions.
Yeah.
And it's just not, I mean, it just doesn't resonate. It's
Yeah.
funny, I'm often puzzled by people who are have a lot of religious beliefs. And so among that is that they're a spiritual being, but the idea that this is foreign to them.
Yeah.
And I go, it just doesn't, because how do you believe in a spiritual or have an experience of a spirit and not know that it's formless? It's your connection to that which was there, and I think of you could have the fanciest appliance. That old metaphor is like any metaphor, it's imperfect, but the old reel-to-reel projector, you could have the most expensive movie projector in the world, but if it has no power source, it's going to sit there inert.
Yeah.
Whether it's a computer, whether it's a refrigerator, whether it's a projector, and that we are connected to something that is what's allowing the physical to experience this journey called life. Is it? I mean, yeah. And this chapter 30, this page 33, I had a person in the not too distant past who was struggling with all kinds of physical experiences, to me, based on their chronic state of mental stress. And at some point, they decided to let go that as clever as they thought they were, they saw that they weren't clever enough to think their way out of this. And so they let go, and for 3 weeks, their pulse went from 110 down to 80. They were feeling calmer. And then something happened in their life, interpersonally, that they got into their thinking about and tried to start figuring out it again. And then for the 10 days prior to me talking, they'd gone into a tailspin. And many of you remember that metaphor. Bob De Alessandri used to love it, when I was in flight surgeon training, and they took us up and put the plane in an inverted spin. And a T-34, all you have to do with a Cessna is to let go of the controls, and it'll come out. You give it a little left rubber, as it comes out straight and normal. But the instructor had to pull the hands off many people in students when he let them do it, even though he showed them twice that the way to get out of the inverted spin was to pull the hands off the controls. And this man saw that he had let go of the controls, and the plane was starting to come out into straight and level. And then he got frightened again and got back into the controls and put it back into a spin. I think that's powerful to know that there is just one mind. There's this universal mind that we're all hooked up to, I guess, our manifestation of, or anyway, I'm jabbering. I apologize. Anybody?
No.
I don't know why. I just feel like it's a missing piece for so many people, and it really matters, especially in having the humility to see that we're all the same.
Yes.
So and that's the key. There's no special people.
Right.
There's and there's no special knowledge. We're plugged into the same universal energy that powers everything. But I remember one time when I was first at WVU, I was asked to do a lecture for residents, and they had heard whatever they heard about me coming there, and they were like, oh God, and they're kind of rolling their eyes. And so I came in, and I could tell they thought I was kind of stupid and kind of a fruitcake, and so I said, well, I thought I'd start by asking you, how many of you instantly know the difference between the living and the dead? And everybody looked like, oh God, she's dumber than I thought, and they're like, well, of course we know that. And I said, great, can you describe it to me? And, you know, first somebody said, well, you know, there's no brain waves or there's, and I'm saying, no, I'm talking about the difference, something you know before you start at feeling for the pulse, you just know it. And finally somebody said, well, that spark is gone. And I said, oh, I'm so glad you brought that up because that's what I'm here to talk to you about.
Mm-hmm.
Spark. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So with that, Brad?
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Judy. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Judy.
Beautiful. The world in the form of nature is a reflection of the human mind, which creates an illusionary gap between the spiritual and the physical. This gap in turn creates the duality of life. Trapped in this duality, our minds become full of disillusionment and lostness. As the human mind ascends in divine consciousness, the gap between the subject and object begins to vanish, and the oneness of life emerges. Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah. Powerful.
David, you want to go forward?
Sure. There's one universal mind, common to all, and wherever you are, it is with you always. There is no end or limitation, nor are there any boundaries to the human mind.
You know, it's funny. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that when we're stuck in our personal thinking, that creates illusionary boundaries that stop us from being able to see and experience things as they could be. And I expect most people have tried really hard to do something and then all of a sudden given up with it because it's not working. And then all of a sudden a flash of inspiration comes because that illusionary wall that they've built for themselves going, I can't do this, I'm just going to give up, dissolves. And then all of a sudden they've got untapped mind coming to them, and the solution is there presented for them when they're not even looking for it. And I think that's one of the beauties of all of this is, we constrain ourselves so much, or we've learned to constrain ourselves so much innocently in terms of the way that we've been taught and brought up. And we're sort of scared potentially to let some of that go and see what else is out there. And this, this is where this is pointing us to is, we know what we know, but there's a load of other stuff inside us that is just there waiting to be explored and released if we just let go of some of our personal thoughts on certain subjects.
Reminds me of a man that I saw who was a mechanic. And as he started to see the principles, he had a moment of insight where he said, my gosh, he said, I've known this in my professional life as a mechanic, but I haven't known it in my personal life, in my relationships. And I said, what do you mean, Joe? He said, I've been a mechanic for many, many years, and I've got a tremendous amount of experience with all kinds of cars. But every once in a while, even after 15, 20 years of doing this, I will I will have a car, and I have all the manuals for that car and all my past experience, and I still cannot figure out what the hell is wrong and what to do for that car. Yeah. And he said, but a few years ago, I came to the realization when I was young, I used to just get so pissed off. I was throwing wrenches around and sometimes making things worse. But I had an insight one time too. I always have other cars that I haven't worked on yet. So I got the insight, why don't I go work on something that I know how to fix? And inevitably, he said, while I was fixing the other car, inevitably the answers would come to me, maybe not on the first one, maybe on the second one, but inevitably, while I was fixing another car, the answer about that car would come to me. Mm-hmm. And what a comfort. I think of Judy's story when she went to talk to these people that were having less than positive pre-thoughts about her coming to speak, that it would have been very easy if she had not known what she knew about universal mind being available to have gotten caught up in the thoughts that her personal mind was spitting out.
Yeah.
And instead, she knew there was a resource beyond her personal thinking and allowed her mind as best as she could to quiet enough to where this beautiful metaphor of the spark came to her. And when things like that came to you, Judy, I bet it's like a 3x5 card. It's like a gift. You didn't think it up.
No, I had no plan going in. So
You
yeah.
had no plan.
Yeah.
But you were okay with not knowing.
And I was used to being considered kind of stupid. So that's kind of like,
Yeah. I had trouble thinking that because I know your IQ is about 40 points higher than mine, so I don't know what that makes me then.
a doctor.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I didn't have to do a dissertation. I just had to pass a bunch of tests. Yeah,
That was my experience in medical
like
school.
you.
Was, when I got on the faculty, they're like, "Who the hell do you think you are?" Yeah.
But I think that's beautiful that you knew that. You knew it was knowing that universal mind was available to you and that it was what you were made of at your core, allowed you to thank your brain for sharing its comments.
Yep.
And yet to be open to seeing something totally new, which you did in the moment. That's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Sid Banks Sid used to say, Bill, if you and I and Judy were talking before I had this experience, and Brad and David or Brad and Ofer would have come up, and suddenly it would have been 5 people instead of 3, I would have had to excuse myself because of social anxiety that I would have created.
Mm.
As he sits quietly in front of a room of 450 people.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Speaking in the moment from nothingness. Yeah.
Yeah. And I used to always think it was so sweet that Sid would have to ask people how to spell words that he used.
Yes.
Because words would occur to him and they were perfect. And Bill and I are big on all the Latin roots and everything.
Right.
We both
Right.
school when we still studied Latin. So, Sid would use these really big words that were just exactly the right word for what he was trying to say. And then afterwards you'd say, well, gee, that was wonderful, Sid. I loved how you used that word, whatever. And Sid would say, well, don't ask me to spell it. I just came to my mind. I have no idea how to spell it.
Well, and he always tells that beautiful story that within 2 months after staying in the mill for 10 months,
yeah,
when he put in his notice, within 2 months he was asked to speak at the University of British Columbia to a large number of professors and students. And when he came off the stage, he asked his wife, Barbara, he said, Barbara, he said, what does this word mean? And he mentioned the word, and she told him what it meant. And he said, oh, that's great. I think I used it 4 times and I used it correctly. He had no idea what the word meant, but he had used it.
And he had confidence in that wisdom that flows through the universal mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that would come up because I'm in the process. I'm just about finished, and I'll probably publish it before I go to Denver tomorrow, but wrote a blog about that, about, when does thought matter? And the answer is always and never.
Mm.
It always matters because it's the only way that we can create our life, and it never matters because it's not important. It's because we can always think again.
Mm.
And I think that's what matters is mind. What matters is the energy behind it, not the thought, not the content of the thought itself.
Right.
Mm.
Well, Ofer, you had said that this was a really important chapter, and you and Brad and David, again, as we end this chapter, I want to ask you anything you have to share to those that your fellow warriors who have been in the midst of combat and experienced things that those of us that have not, and of how anything you might want to say about this chapter, then it would be helpful.
I don't know, for me, dealing with PTSD was dealing with losing control over how I feel, or over how I think, or over how I behave. And like, it's a natural process for someone who loses control to trying to take control back. And it was funny that I spent many years trying to get control back. And it took me a while to understand that it wasn't about getting control back. It's about agreeing to not be in control. I know it's kind of hard to explain, but
No,
it's beautiful.
it's beautiful. You're right on. Yeah.
So it doesn't mean you don't control how you talk or behave. I mean, sometimes you don't, but I don't know. Like sometimes you get. It's like for me, sometimes you go into. How do you have those things with the ladies' name there in the States? How do you call them? The hurricanes. Hurricanes? Yeah. And sorry.
We have a
And,
thought hurricane.
What?
A thought hurricane.
Yeah, so you have like a thought hurricane, you know, and it's like David said before, you're not always going to be able even to predict how you're going to react to that thought hurricane. And sometimes they can go on for quite a while, and you know, the more I tried to fight them, the more it became worse. And for me, it was about just waiting. Sometimes just waiting for the, I don't know, for the wind to clear.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the more I could understand that, the more the hurricane would clear faster.
That's powerful. That's powerful.
That is beautiful.
And also, like a hurricane, hurricanes die. They run out of energy. They stop. They don't go on and on and on and on and on. So just like that, you know, when you are in a thought hurricane, it will come to an end naturally on its own. It will run out of energy. But if you are engaging with it, you're adding fuel to it, and it has the potential to last a little bit longer. So just let it run its natural course. You might notice that it's there, and it sort of dissolves a little bit faster, but it will just naturally run its course and run out, and a fresh thought will come along, and it's, you know, it has every chance to be better than the one that you've just been caught in. And there is no judgment in getting caught in them either. You know, we have no control over what thoughts pop into our head or how we react to them initially. And it's just allowing yourself to understand that that's how it works, that you don't need to do anything and that it will pass. That, you know, that's what's so beautiful about this. It's that knowledge that it will stop, and you don't have to do anything to stop it. It will just naturally run its course.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the definition of our own innate health.
Right.
There's the confidence that thoughts come and go, but mind is a constant. The spirit is constant.
Right. Did you have anything, Brad?
Yeah, no, I love what both Fair and Dave were both talking about. It's beautiful. And I think for me, of the three, this one's always been the most important, mind, understanding, because I think even as a young child, I had this understanding. I knew we were connected to something bigger, and there was a great mystery around us. And then having gone to war and seen the atrocities of it and seeing what happened, you know, at first I was just thinking, how could God let this happen? But now with this understanding, seeing that it's really about human beings not understanding how the mind really works, get caught up in their thinking. And that was a result of war, and that universal mind is always there waiting to give us wisdom if we just let our thinking settle. It's always, always, always there. And just the understanding of how this really works is the game changer. And that to me is so hopeful, There's just more people understanding, and the more I can work with warriors and first responders and do this work to give them hope as they continue to see whatever they have to experience, the trauma, what they experience when they're out doing their jobs or whatever, that there's hope for them too.
Yes. You know, not having experienced the combat, but having been in the military and being a Navy flight surgeon, the one thing that I remember from, and some of you have heard me tell the story, supposedly when I was out 100 miles on an aircraft carrier in the Atlantic Ocean, and they were doing operation readiness to go to the North Sea, where the winds and the waves, and as you know, David, is pretty cold and wicked. And so they waited to do the operational readiness during a time that a big storm was coming up in the Atlantic. And I got landed on the carrier on an S2, and that evening they sent all the jets out. And how many people have heard me tell this story about oh, they haven't? Okay. So they sent all the jets out, and the CEO of the aircraft carrier actually let me up in the tower to watch all the planes be catapulted off, the jets. And then total darkness came as the storm moved in, and no moon, no stars. Winds, I forget, I think they were in the 40 to 50 mile an hour. The waves were 25 to 40 foot waves. So even this huge aircraft carrier with 5,000 men on it is doing a dance like this. And then they started bringing the pilots back in to land on the aircraft carrier with their little hook on the back and the 4 cables. And if you if you lock onto the first one, it means you just missed running into the end of the boat. And if you lock onto the 4th one, it means you just almost went off the end. And as most of you may know, when a jet pilot lands on an aircraft carrier, as he comes down, he puts full throttle, so that if he misses the cables or bounces over them, he has the power to get off rather than going into the ocean. But so as they're trying to land there, many of them with no frame of reference, and I won't take the time, but they showed us in flight surgeon school with a centrifuge, they showed us what vertigo was like when you take off the hood and your body tells you you're going one way and your eyes tell you you're going another way. And so they wanted to give us the example of what happens to a pilot when he experiences that he's upside down and he wants to turn the plane over. And do you know what keeps and this young pilot could not land. He tried 3 times, and if he would have failed the 4th time, he would have had to eject out of a airplane that was worth, I don't know how many $1 million or a billion. And so they sent him to land as the Navy pilots are tough on the Air Force pilots, Brad. They say land as the Air Force pilots land in a nice flat lighted field, and he landed there. And many of the other pilots the next day in the briefings, some of the experienced pilots had the same vertigo, where they experienced that they were upside down. Does anybody want to say why it was that they landed safely? What was the difference between the young pilot that wasn't able to land his plane when his body told him he was upside down, and the veteran pilots that did land their plane safely? Anybody?
You didn't listen to your body, the veteran guy.
They trusted their instruments.
They trusted their instruments. Somebody has come on. I'm going to ask you to wait. We're on a program. I'm not sure who that is.
No,
It's Dave.
Dave's come back. He went away and he came back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my computer. That's all right. No, my computer died on me, and
No. I apologize. I thought it might have been my next person early. Yeah, and was that you, Brad, that said that, or
Yeah.
They trusted their instruments. And that, so when we say if we can know, as we said earlier, that our feeling level is always going to be a feedback to us. If we trust our instruments, if we know that when our feeling level turns south, that paying more attention to our thinking is not, it's never going to give us the answer. If the more we have insights into that, at least my experience in working with people, whether they were people with PTSD or not, the more people learn to trust their instruments and know that they're getting valuable information to leave their thinking alone as best as they can, that they'll be moving back towards their mental well-being. Anyway, I don't know if that's helpful to people, but
It is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Can I add a little something small?
Sure.
We talked about using our emotions as a sort of a barometer, but like you probably know that like guys with PTSD sometimes, and not even with PTSD, sometimes they get the opposite, where you don't feel anything at all. And for me, that is also a very big hint, because when I get like emotionally blocked, it means that I shouldn't trust my thinking as well.
That's a powerful point, because the numbness is something trying to minimize the pain. Yeah, that's really powerful. So with that, is there anything before we stop on this chapter?
No, but thank you. This has really been very helpful. I love these talks. Thank you.
Me too. Me too.
Yep.